Welcome back to Encyclopedia.zone. My name is Dr. Don Jolly. I'm the editor-in-chief of Encyclopedia.zone, a freelance writer whose work has appeared in G-Fan magazine and Knights of the Dinner Table magazine. And introduce yourself, James.
Hello, my name is James. Most people call me James. I've just debuted a YouTube channel under my Twitter handle Jamsarm. It is called Daylight Savings Time, and I hope to talk about movies and history and just whatever comes into my head.
Yeah, and he's got his video that he just put up is a walkthrough of James's VHS collection, which this is not some hipster bullshit that he assembled from Goodwills over the last 6 months. This is an old school VHS collection. This is going back, man. This is like mailing in for the free rebate on the back of the Batman '89 VHS tape.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I was so disappointed. Oh, why'd you bring that up? I was so disappointed when that 900 number to call in to order the Warner Brothers ball caps got disconnected.
Yeah, well, speaking of numbers getting disconnected, we've been getting together on YouTube here, usually in person, although, of course, now we cannot legally get together in person to do this. We have been getting together now for over the course of the Democratic primary, the 2020 Democratic primary, to talk about the race, talk about how things are shaking out. And right now, the world has exploded. We've got the COVID-19 epidemic. We're here in Austin, Texas. We're being told to shelter in place. This has had a huge effect on the race, like an existential effect. Like, I think it's kind of questionable whether there is a race anymore. So let's go back in time a little bit before we put on the masks to March 15th, which is sort of the last video.
Briefly, sorry, briefly interrupt you. Yeah, it's a shame. Your theme for this campaign has been masks off, and here we go, putting masks on.
Yeah, we got the masks off. You know, neoliberal court. Well, you know, this is a mask off moment though, because you know and I've talked about this on the channel and other places, but the fragile nature of our society, you know, politically, but you know, in a lot of very important infrastructural ways, in terms of healthcare, in terms of the distribution systems for our goods and services, like it has been showed up as extremely fucking fragile, as this compounding of very short-term decisions, and all it took was essentially a cough for the whole thing to start falling in on itself. Like 3.3 million people are unemployed. We've got people going into debt, getting tested for this like highly infectious disease. There are so many dead expected in New York that there are refrigerated FEMA corpse trucks outside of every hospital. And somebody today apparently tried to derail a high-speed train in Los Angeles to slam it into the hospital ship, which is there. There was another white nationalist bombing attack, which apparently was set up by the FBI. I get all my information from Twitter, so it's, you know, well, not all my information.
Hang on. They were trying to slam a train into a ship?
I don't know exactly how it worked. I just saw the breaking news thing, and like, if I'm completely full of shit, if this was just a bullshit April Fool's Day tweet. I don't know who would tweet about a terrorist attack on a hospital ship.
Especially using a train. Like, how do you get the train into the water?
Well, have you seen Shin Godzilla? Because they use trains as a weapon in that movie. I think it's very doable. Shin Godzilla is highly realistic.
Well, was he picking up the train and throwing it? Because the terrorists don't have a Godzilla.
Well, yet.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The terrorists don't have a Godzilla yet. Once I join ISIS, things are going to be different. Things are going to change.
Done.
Yeah, no, look. Okay, I'm not going to join ISIS yet.
No.
But listen, look, the great thing about COVID-19 is you don't need to join ISIS to destroy American empire. The germ is going to do it for you. So the world has been completely upended by this disease. And I know that everybody's daily lives have changed quite a bit. I think that probably a lot of our audience is out of work. I'm out of work personally.
I'm out of work.
Yeah, everybody's out of work. And so, you know, this gives us a lot of time to read and reflect. But honestly, like the ecosystem of political news has also dried up. The Times is not covering it as much as they were. The Wall Street Journal is hardly covering it at all. There's so much COVID information that has sort of taken over the information streams that traditionally are devoted to the media spectacle of politics. So things are very different now. It's a very different ecosystem, and we're going to try to talk about that as much as we can. But James, if you're willing to indulge me, I would like to turn back time.
Okay.
Let's go to March 15th. So a couple of things happened on March 15th. The week prior, we did our last video where we sort of summed up the race from South Carolina to Super Tuesday to the round of voting the week after Super Tuesday, which is sort of when Biden cemented his lead. Or when, the Biden lead was manufactured by a number of deft political moves, in my opinion. March 15th, there was a stand-up debate between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And I didn't fucking watch it. Did you fucking watch it?
I read summaries, but I did not watch the debate. I'm not really into debates because they're just going for, canned answers and sound bites, and those show up in the print media just fine in their entirety.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of these situations where, like, the Bernie people all said that he killed it. Some people were saying Biden was more animated than he was. Like, I didn't really find any threads coming out of that debate that I found particularly useful.
Yeah, the expectations for Biden in debates is so low that he can only surpass them.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is a Calvin and Hobbes thing, right? Where if you keep everybody's expectations low, when you do the minimum, then people are very impressed with you. So there was the debate on the 15th, and that was also the day that the CDC issued guidelines. At this point, not orders. This was before shelter in place, etc. Saying that groups larger than 50 should not gather. So this had an interesting effect, and like, I don't want to be too like deferential to Bernie here, because there were Bernie surrogates on Twitter telling people, like, okay, so on the 17th, the Tuesday after the debate, there were 4 primaries scheduled: Florida, Arizona, Illinois, and Ohio. Now, Ohio ended up canceling their primaries. It was a little bit of a contentious thing, I believe, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but the governor ended up canceling them after the state legislature sort of, made a provisional decision that they should go on anyway, but the governor declared it to be an emergency health situation.
That sounds familiar, and I believe he canceled it the day before it was going to be held.
Yeah, the Ohio voting was canceled the day before. However, voting still went on in Arizona, Illinois, and Florida. And there were Bernie surrogates on Twitter telling people to go out and vote. But there were Biden surrogates saying this in a much more prominent way. And, of course, whenever there's a debate, the candidates go and they do their post-debate interviews, and, they go out and they do their little press tour, right? So Bernie Sanders was on Anderson Cooper on the 15th. And he was asked by Anderson Cooper, should there be a primary Tuesday in light of the CDC's recommendation to ban groups larger than 50 people? And Bernie Sanders said, and I'm going to just read the whole quote, this is a very good question, and as you know, Louisiana and Georgia and Puerto Rico have delayed their elections, postponed them. They've got dates in the future. Look, election dates are very, very important. We don't want to be getting into the habit of messing around with them. But you remember, and I just researched this, 9/11, there was a primary in New York City, and it was canceled for obvious reasons in New York City, and it was rescheduled 2 weeks later, to the benefit of Michael Bloomberg, about whom we should talk a little bit more in the future.
Right.
Excuse me, I'm infected with the deadly disease that is killing our society.
Oh, no.
I would hope the governors listen to the public health experts, and they're saying we don't want gatherings of 50 or more people. And when I think about some of the elderly people sitting behind the desks, registering people and all that, does that make a lot of sense? I'm not sure that it does. So that's not the strongest condemnation, but Biden surrogates on Twitter responded to this Bernie quote with, confusion, saying, is he telling people not to go out and vote? By contrast, let's go to another Sanders. I believe this was on the 15th. Simone Sanders, who is a surrogate for the Biden campaign, appeared on Chris Cuomo's show on CNN. Chris Cuomo, of course, has fucking COVID now, which, yeah, I'm just going to let that go. And she said, When asked a similar question to what was asked of Bernie on Anderson Cooper's, our democracy is extremely important. Even in times of strife in this country, we have to do our duty. So the CDC and folks have said it's safe out there for Tuesday, which is a lie. So I don't know what Senator Sanders was talking about. I encourage people to get out there and vote on Tuesday. And there were a couple of Twitter messages to this effect from the Biden campaign. Essentially, I think Simone Sanders is the only one to actually go into outright fabrication and say that the CDC had cleared it. I do know that Joe Biden posted a message on his Twitter, I believe the day before the primary, where he said, if you are feeling healthy, go out and vote on Tuesday, which is, of course, that is based on incorrect information because you can spread the COVID-19 germ even if you are asymptomatic. I spent Election Day, the 17th, calling Democratic parties in Florida, the Democratic Party in Florida, Arizona, and Illinois, coughing my lungs out and asking them to direct me to a polling place. And even when people, like, there's a video of it here on the channel, even when the apparatchiks at the party seemed to, like, glom on to the fact that I was pranking them, they always directed me to a polling place, and they never gave me health or safety recommendations. Just watching the election day, what actually happened on the 17th, especially in Illinois, is where I found the most evidence of this. There was
unethical voting in Illinois. My God.
Well, it was a debacle voting in Illinois. People were shunted into unventilated basements. Essential poll equipment, like the blue boxes that were necessary to actually, like, record votes, were not delivered at many polling places. Many polling places were closed at the last minute. A lot of poll workers didn't show up. There wasn't any kind of sanitation or, health, no masks, no gloves, no hand sanitizer in a lot of voting locations. Some voting locations only had 2 bottles of sanitizer that were only used by poll staff. There are no exit polls for, at least not any exit polls that I could find with my very cursory search prior to this episode. Usually we use New York Times exit polls here on the show. Maybe the Washington Post did some, but the Times did not provide any exit polls for Arizona, Florida, or Illinois. But based on what we talked about last time, the majority of Democratic voters, and all of these states, by the way, went for Biden. By the end of the 17th, Biden was posting his victory messages on Twitter, like, oh, we won another one. These are older people. These are people who are at risk of dying of COVID-19. And it is my contention that, it's completely fair and accurate to say that Donald Trump minimized the impacts of the disease.
Oh, yes. He said we were on lockdown.
Yeah. There's every night a freight train comes by my house and sets off this dude's car alarm every fucking night. Anyway, we're going to just power through it. It is my contention. And,
I was going to say, while that's going on, maybe do some less important stuff. For instance, is there a story behind how you got your mask?
Oh, yeah. A very good friend of mine, his significant other, is sewing masks for everybody. So I've actually got this really sweet reversible mask. Could you tell me about yourself? Why do you wear the mask?
No one cared who I was till I put on the mask. But the mask keeps the pain at bay.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
No, to be fair, I had a nice conversation with someone prior to all this really taking off. She had been a nurse, and she said, the thing about masks, they don't protect you from outside elements or germs, or in this case, COVID-19. What they do is, if you have the COVID-19, it prevents you from spreading it to others. So if you are looking into a mask, what I've been told is that it is not something you do to protect yourself, it's something you do to protect others, which is equally important.
Well, yeah, especially for younger guys like us, because it's like, if we get the germ, we are going to be asymptomatic, or maybe we'll have like small cold-like symptoms. but we can continue carrying it, and it can be very lethal to people who are Joe Biden's core voting demographic, the exact kind of people that his campaign lied to in the lead up to these elections and exposed to dangerous pathogens for political benefit.
Yeah, I would say as far as the voting thing goes, it's kind of it's almost a catch-22, because if you say, yes, we're going to cancel the elections out of fear of public health, you've done a good thing. But at the same time, you would have been canceling an election, which I don't like using this term, is a very un-American concept. It is. I mean, like, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I like going to the polls. I like casting my vote. I do believe that if you get a few million people together, those votes ought to matter in the final analysis, even if it's a wipeout or a whisker of a win. So, yeah, I think that if the government had immediately united around the concept of saying, yes, we're going to cancel our upcoming primaries, then I would have been suspicious of the government response, thinking, oh, they're trying to pull a fast one on us. So it is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Well, but I think that there's a difference.
And just
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I forgot this one had a wire. But I would only say that it's to me very much like after 9/11, the de facto government, or the not de facto, the definite government response was we were told to get back to normal life, to go shopping, to maintain our normal routine. So I feel like in the event of a major crisis, that's kind of the default position of the government, just to say, yeah, it's fine, just go about your business.
But we're not talking about a government response. We're talking about,
elected officials.
Well, but we're not talking about that either. We're talking about representatives of the Biden campaign misrepresenting the CDC in order to encourage turnout among their extremely vulnerable voting base.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is a different thing. I mean, I understand that it's like that they are in a damned if they do, damned if they don't situation, right? In terms of the campaigns, because like the governors of those states, the state governments in every state voting that day, except Ohio. Although I think there were originally other votes planned for that day, though. You correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway, Ohio canceled it. Florida, Arizona, Illinois, we're going ahead. So are they going to countermand the state government there? Like when Bernie Sanders sort of even implied that he didn't want people to go out and vote on Tuesday, it did not provoke, like people did not hail him as a hero, right? Outside of the Bernie Sanders campaign, Bernie Sanders followers who hail him as a hero even when he's not doing something particularly heroic. But I do think that there's something very, significant and like evil about lying about what the CDC is saying, telling people that the CDC said it's safe to vote after they had already said we shouldn't have gatherings of 50 or more people. That's every fucking polling place except the most rural of rural counties. And once again, Biden's voters who are, I did the breakdown in HRC 2020 Part 2, which you can read on the site. Biden's voters are older. They get their information from television. These are exactly the kind of people who are going to be listening when Simone Sanders says, the CDC tells you it is safe to vote. They are the most at risk of dying of this disease. And we already have 2 poll workers in Florida who tested positive for COVID. And the whole process, by the way, that the Florida Democratic, they're saying, well, it's only 2, and only one of them is symptomatic, as if that matters. It's even worse if you have an asymptomatic person, right? But the whole procedure that they have for figuring out whether these poll workers or people that were in the polls that day have COVID is they're waiting for the poll workers to contact them. The actual quote, I have the quote here. Let me pull this up. 1 second. Yeah, here we go. This is Wendy Link, supervisor for elections for Palm Beach County. Said it's up to workers to notify her. I'm quoting for the Miami Herald here. We have not gotten any notification or any word from any poll workers that they've been sick or tested, she said. I would assume that if they had, they would have told us. So, well, I mean, this is a...
Never assume.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Well,
I understand what you're saying. Just one little quick point.
Okay, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying in terms of it being un-American to cancel elections, and in deference to your point, if at a national level, if the elections had been called off due to a public health emergency several weeks ago, perhaps when they should have been called off, I would have been suspicious of it too.
Yeah.
If this had happened prior to Super Tuesday, like I would have been very suspicious. I would have been like, "Oh my God, it's a conspiracy to get Bernie Sanders."
I know they already canceled Iowa, or yeah, not canceled Iowa, but they postponed Iowa. They did a freeze on Iowa.
Yeah,
So
well,
it would have been fishy as hell.
It would have been fishy as hell. Like I understand that point of view, but this is one of the problems, I think, is like, and I'll admit it, I've been focused on this election, and you think that this ritual, because this is my whole thing, is like I think American politics is primarily a religious exercise. This is a ritual. This is a way by which we orient ourselves in time and space, and we gain some small amount of feeling of control over the vastness of this imperial product that is America. This imperial mechanism is a better way to think about it. We got so caught up in that illusion, in that ritual, in that belief, that we weren't paying attention to the very real thing that was COVID. Because, I knew that this was coming from January. Like, and I'm not saying that, like, oh, I saw it coming. I'm just saying that I was seeing the posts. I was reading what the WHO was saying. I was seeing, my favorite thing was there was an Anon on 4chan that got onto, like, they duped an IP address in Wuhan and got onto Chinese Grindr, which is, like, the gay hookup app, and used it to get information from behind the Iron Firewall about what was actually going on in Wuhan, that the death numbers were much larger, that the lockdown was much more extensive than was being reported, in January. I was looking at drone footage of people being harassed back into their homes. I was watching, the people singing in solidarity from Wuhan, which just sounded like screams of torture and pain to me because I don't understand Chinese. I saw all this stuff coming, and I did not take it seriously because I was so focused on this bullshit phony reality, which is, the election, which, I'm not saying that it's like total bullshit or it's like a complete performance, but it is a big media spectacle. It's very disconnected from like the world of mucous membranes and like lungs filling with blood. And that was actually the thing that we should have been paying attention to. That was the real news. And like, Michael Tracy, who's a, independent journalist that I like quite a bit, he's been saying that like the entire press establishment was totally focused on impeachment when they should have been focused on COVID. And, I think that there's point to that, but I think it's more important to say not just impeachment, not just Bernie, not just Biden, not just Elizabeth Warren. We were focused on politics when a global pandemic was boiling up around our ankles. And, now we're looking at months of pure hell. I mean, would it have made a difference if we had been paying attention? Would it have made a difference if it had been covered differently in the press? I don't know. But I think that this, and I don't want to overstate it. I mean, I fucking hate Joe Biden at this point, mostly because of this. Like, you can talk about the bankruptcy bill, his different political positions, whatever else. But, like, Simone Sanders lying to people and saying that the CDC has cleared it, that it's okay to vote. And, killing old people that believe her. I thought that was just miserable.
I would only go back and once again use one of my favorite phrases, which is the government incompetence theory.
Well, what do you mean? Like
our government is incompetent, and I think that this would be like if this were a court case against the Biden campaign, and let's say that they were trying to say that the campaign willingly put people in danger with the intent to kill.
Oh, I don't think they willingly did it. I think that I think that they were greedy. I think that they were selfish.
Well, yeah, no, it's
but they did lie. That is a lie to say that the CDC cleared it.
Yeah, but it would be to me like trying to successfully pull off a libel suit. You have to actually prove malicious intent within the lie. And I think that their intent was to win an election. A political operative was trying to win an election. That is in their job description. Now,
So they were just following orders?
I will let you have that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on because like I think it's a pretty fucking nightmarish concept. And once again, like I'm being hard on the Biden campaign here, but the Bernie campaign was encouraging people to go out and vote as well on Twitter. I do think that it's a little bit of an asterisk because Bernie was expressing, even like his slight reticence on Sunday in the post debate things, but it's both campaigns to an extent. The entire political process really has blood on its hands, but mostly the Biden campaign. So anyway, that's the last round of voting that we had, and then COVID has been becoming more and more the focus of our political lives since then. So what's the next thing to cover? That's the last round of voting. As of right now, Joe Biden is, in the 1,200 delegate range. Bernie Sanders is like 900 delegates, thereabouts. I do want to ask you directly, just based on historical precedents, as a Bernie guy myself, do you see any path forward for Mr. Sanders?
I do not, if only because before we paused these primaries, Bernie had not won Texas, not won Minnesota, not won Massachusetts. And so I think that he had, or his campaign had failed to win critical primaries that they would have needed to get the momentum going. I still stand by what I said about our vote in Texas being the big indicator. Because if Bernie had won California and Texas, I think that's a completely different narrative altogether going out of Super Tuesday. But he didn't, and though I don't think he has a path. Now, we were talking about this prior to the show. And I'm not sure what the scope of the betting is, but I found it odd that on the Real Clear Politics website, they actually have a betting odds on the 2020 Democratic nomination, and Biden is winning with 90% of the betting vote. Bernie is actually third. Second place is Hillary Clinton.
Well, I mean, HRC 2020, I still believe that she will win.
Yeah.
I mean,
I definitely thought of you when I saw that.
Well, this isn't a joke though. Like,
no,
Biden is a weak candidate in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, like as far as the historical precedent, it does remind me of how late in the game in 2016, the GOP tried to encourage Mitt Romney, who had passed on running that year, saying it was time for a new generation of Republican leaders to take the reins, and he gave a big speech on an aircraft carrier in San Diego. Mm-hmm. Jeb Bush was the anointed one, along with Scott Walker and all these other rising stars or new leaders. But then the GOP establishment and all their arrogance didn't realize, oh, wait, this groundswell of support for Donald Trump is getting somewhere. And there was a late attempt to get Romney on the ballot, or to suggest he should get on the ballot in California. That way he would win some delegates, and then, should Trump not win on the second ballot, there would have been an anti-Trump movement at the convention. Mm-hmm. Now, just kind of looking at the situation as it is, I was shocked that the current governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo's approval rating has shot up into the 80s. Mm-hmm. And you have Andrew Cuomo, who I had to go back over his record because I knew he'd been a political office holder for a very long time. He has been governor since 2011. Prior to that, he was the Attorney General of New York. And prior to that, he had been Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Bill Clinton. So, long-tenured Democrat. And I want to say his age is 62. So he is not as old as a Biden, a Warren, or a Sanders. Now, if I were Andrew Cuomo, I would not want to campaign for president. I would kind of think about what Franklin Roosevelt did in 1940, where no one had ever been elected to, and no one has, aside from him, been elected to a third term. And there was a lot of opposition to him running in 1940. Mm-hmm. So they kind of faked a draft movement, and he carried the 1940 convention by saying, oh, well, they want me to run. And I didn't want to, but, they want me. If somehow uh, the right signatures were gathered and a petition was made to put Andrew Cuomo's name on the New York primary ballot, assuming they can pull off a primary in this climate. I would be very surprised how that hypothetical vote would go. Because if you suddenly see, a guy who is also getting press conference coverage, New York is getting hit very hard by this.
Yeah, they're
and
the
again,
epicenter of the virus here.
It is the epicenter, yeah, yeah.
And actually worldwide now, I hear.
Oh, God, really?
Well,
Ugh.
I don't quote me exactly on that, but, like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
the epicenter here in the country, for sure.
I mean, well, outside of China.
Well, outside of China, yeah. And we can't trust the numbers coming
No,
out of
you
China.
can't. No,
our
no.
our intelligence, our wise intelligence
Oh.
officers just put out a thing about that today.
I did want to quickly, in regard to the China thing,
Mm.
I do want to pull out a quote from John F. Kennedy in order to take a shot at our Chinese friends. At the height of the space race, when the Soviets were beating us at every turn, getting the first man in space, first spacewalk, etc., first woman in space, and in the meantime, our rockets were blowing up on the launch pads. Kennedy had a good shot at the Russians during all that. He gave a speech, and he talked about our failures, and he said, and we own up to our failures, and we make them public.
No, we don't.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that the Soviets had just as many rockets that exploded in the launch pads. Just they didn't have any press there to cover them live on TV, and so things have gotten pretty bad in the United States. Our government response has been, something you would want to see improvement on. But you know what? You and I can hop on the internet, and people can hop on Twitter and complain openly about this, and I don't have to worry about someone breaking down my door and killing me.
Yet.
Yeah, I'll just conclude by saying, yeah, I think that a possible draft Cuomo movement would have some relevance, just because I could imagine superdelegates, should there be a second ballot, actually saying, this Cuomo guy, he's also one of us. He's been in the government a very long time, not as long as Joe Biden. He's good on the stump. He's been tested in crisis after crisis. And, he has aggravated a lot of liberals in New York. A lot of people say he's not liberal enough. I think he's had to fight the teachers' unions on some pension stuff and a few other tax measures.
That's something Bloomberg that got very involved in, too, when he was in New York. Like, the public pensions are like an enemy of the state up there.
Yeah, but he was for gay marriage before it was cool. It's from a long political family. And at this moment, I think should he allow operatives on his side to put him on the ballot, and let's say, maybe the polls or the mail-in ballots, however we pull off our elections, I'd be curious if maybe, I don't know, 36% of the vote went to Cuomo in that primary, Biden 30, Bernie 30, and suddenly there's another candidate with a few delegates to play around with in Milwaukee once they have their convention.
But
and maybe those
are they going to have the convention?
The thing I've heard is that they're still committed to having a convention in some way.
Yeah,
however that means.
This is the thing that's weird. Like, okay, let's talk about Cuomo first, and then I want to talk about I have a second point that I want to get to.
But I would see him as a rival to Biden, or someone who could take advantage of the situation.
Yeah,
here we go talking politics. Yeah, here we go. With my old speech impediment acting up, but here we go, being distracted by politics during the middle of a crisis again.
Yeah, well, okay, so Cuomo, I definitely understand the push for Cuomo right now, which I think is not just happening, in the betting markets or whatever. I mean, the betting markets, you said, aren't really reacting, but the draft Cuomo movement is something that I think is very real, and I think that there's always been a possibility, and I've been talking about it for months, that it doesn't really matter who gets the votes, because they could just anoint whoever they want at the convention, especially if it does get pushed to that second ballot, if neither Bernie nor Biden is able to secure that 1991 delegate that they need to clinch it on the first round. And I do think that there's some issues with nominating Biden. I mean, did you see the poll that came out this week that the enthusiasm for Biden was 24% among Democrats?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, like the guy, and like we're not even talking about the scandal. We'll get to that in a little bit. But, you know, there's some serious, you know, flaws with Biden. What I said going into this race was Biden is Jeb Bush. He looks like the anointed one, but I think he's going to fold under pressure. And I actually maintain my assessment there. I don't think he's quite as weak and feeble as, you know, Bernie Twitter portrays him as. I think he is very capable of giving a snappy political performance, especially for the purposes of his, like, basically brain damaged older audience. But he has some serious deficiencies as a guy that you want to run against Donald Trump, because he's primarily running, like Jeb Bush, on name recognition, except it's not even his name, it's the Obama name. I don't think that Biden has a particularly strong brand. And I do think that he's incoherent on the stump more than he needs to be. And it goes beyond gaffes. It's like he loses the thread of his responses, especially when he's in a direct questioning situation. And like, if you can't be snappy, if you can't come up with those fucking zingers, and if you can't be aggressive, which Biden can be aggressive, but when Biden gets aggressive,
it's an angry way.
It's angry and it's inarticulate. And that's the thing, is like Trump, the way that he plays, like even when he gets angry, he's always in control. He's always like smarmy. He's funny. He's genuinely funny. And Biden is not. Biden does not have this charisma. So I think there's serious flaws with him as a general election candidate. Question then, why is he, you know, at the front of the race? And I think it's because we had basically this artificial moment that happened after South Carolina where everybody dropped out, pledged their support behind Biden because he'd won his first primary ever. But it was, you know, strategically timed. It was like the primary right before Super Tuesday. It gave him the appearance of that momentum, and the media and the Democratic operatives all consolidated behind him and basically weekend at Bernie's this fucking corpse through 2 weeks of voting until, you know, unsatisfied with having a dead candidate, they decided to kill all of their voters too. And this is what we got in Illinois, Arizona, and Florida. And I think that since then, enthusiasm for Biden, like the delay of these elections, I think changes the math quite a bit. Like the big day now is June 2nd, but we don't know. Like to be honest, like right now, any political prognostication that we make is ridiculous because we are off the fucking map. Like this is the second thing that I want to say. Like we're off the fucking map. We don't know how the convention's going to be held. You say that they're still committed to holding the convention in some way. I've seen people talking about an online convention. I mean, we don't know how any of this shit is going to work. We don't know whether this June 2nd date is going to be in-person voting or whether it's going to be an extended period for mail-in voting. I know that the Biden campaign, reversing its earlier evil decision, is now advocating for mail-in voting, you know, all the way around. Bernie still does believe he has a path forward, and I think that, you know, I can't get into the delegate math of it, and honestly, I think it's possible that no matter how much the argument I'm about to make is cogent, there is just not a mathematical path for Bernie to get into the nomination, right? But I said, you know, the issue that he needs to grab onto is healthcare, and especially universal healthcare, which, according to the exit polls that we saw from the last states where there were exit polls, this is very important to the majority of Democratic voters. Healthcare is the number one issue. They're in favor of a single-payer system. Joe Biden is not in favor of a single-payer system. Even now, he's giving interviews talking about how it's not going to solve this problem. We need to work with the private insurers. I'm sorry. The healthcare fucking industry is destroyed, Joe Biden. Everything is fucked. Like, people are going into debt over this fucking, you know, coronavirus thing. People are not getting tested. People are not going to the hospital when they need to go to the hospital. They're not going to the doctor when they need to go to the doctor. And they're spreading an infectious disease that's going to kill, at minimum, 200,000 Americans.
And when your healthcare is tied to your job and you have no job, yeah,
and 3.3 million people.
A lot of Americans are gonna feel that way pretty soon. Yeah.
Well, I think like a lot of Americans, especially in the Democratic Party, already felt that way. But I think it's easy, especially for older Americans, to sort of shut out. While Bernie Sanders is advocating for this and Joe Biden isn't, because Joe Biden is the guy who looks like the president, and Bernie Sanders is a dangerous Russian asset, according to the Washington Post. But I think now there is a real opportunity for Bernie to do what I recommended he do in our last episode, which is grab onto that healthcare issue and ride it into some real, surging successes. And is
Yeah,
that
try to make it like an official part of the Democratic Party platform or something. Yeah.
well? The other thing that benefits Bernie is now the election is taking place online, and Bernie's younger supporters are much more connected online than Biden supporters. I was trolling a Joe Biden live stream earlier this week where he was having a roundtable with young people that volunteered on his campaign or that he'd met in college Democrat circles. Literally everybody who came in to ask him a question was somebody that he'd met before. It was supposed to be a roundtable to address the issues that are important to young Americans. And, I'm 33. I'm a youngish American. So I went in there and I asked Joe Biden, in the chat, what it feels like to digitally penetrate a senatorial aide. And I did it repeatedly with a number of different accounts. I got banned a couple of times. But, for the most part, I was basically allowed to yell at this presidential candidate unimpeded for hours and hours. And you know why? Because there were 2,000 people watching it at its peak moment. Bernie Sanders gets much more than that on a typical broadcast. And he's been doing a number of these coronavirus broadcasts, right?
Just from my own, not to interrupt your train of thought, but just to get my perspective right. So, is online the way they're really talking about for voting? Because I just really assumed that they would go for a vote by mail thing.
No. I don't mean that the voting is going to be online. I mean that the campaigning is going to be online.
Because
okay, now Biden, he has to do these live streams. Bernie Sanders is very comfortable doing live streams. His campaign is very digital savvy. The Biden campaign is not. The Biden campaign is terrible at it. And so I think that this is an environment that favors Sanders. As to whether that's going to be too little too late, I don't know. But Sanders is staying in the race for a reason, and it's probably just to try and advocate for his policy positions, which, the New Yorker just had a story this week. Reality has endorsed Bernie Sanders. I happen to agree with that in a number of particulars. I think that the collapse of the economy and the collapse of our healthcare system, the complete inability of the American system to deal with this disease, and the just titanic effects of it, advocates for a great expansion of the social safety net, and the nationalization of the healthcare industry, which are Bernie Sanders, sterling old school positions that he's had for years and years and years, and I think that the mistreatment of hourly workers by companies like Amazon, by the gig employee people like Instacart and all the delivery people out there working, also is a important endorsement of Sanders' pro-labor platform. Like, we've got Amazon workers in New York getting ready, striking, threatening strike because of unsanitary conditions in their factories, and I wish them all the best. I think that there is a real chance, whether this interfaces with the fucking presidential election or not, I think that this COVID is a wake-up call about some of the essential inequalities in our society and a boon to socialist politics in America going forward, just in general. I mean, we'll see how long this goes on. We'll see what happens. But I do think that this is a potential opening for Bernie Sanders, maybe even within the context of the Democratic primary. But more than that, I think with the disruption of COVID, and people are talking about how Trump's approval rating is going up as a result of this, and we've talked about this a little bit. I think this is a rally around the flag effect.
Yeah.
I don't think this means that he's invincible in November. I would have said that he, in January, I was like, it's an outside chance that anybody beats him. But now,
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I guess, my God, yeah. In between our this show and the previous one, for 4 years, from January 2017 to the present. So I guess 3 years and 3 months. I've been saying over and over again that Donald Trump has at least a 60% chance of being reelected. I said that throughout everything that he has said, every moment he was a flaming asshole, and throughout this entire Democratic race as well. Now I'm not so sure.
I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I would have said, as the extent of the government's mishandling of this became clear, and it becomes clearer every day, I'm kind of the opinion that you could run a box of cornflakes against Donald Trump right now and beat him.
If Joe Biden was a cereal, what kind of cereal do you think he'd be?
Like Fiber One.
Yeah, gotta have your fiber.
I think if Bernie Sanders was a cereal, I don't know. It's like mini wheats. He's got the white.
Maybe frosted mini wheats.
Well, that's what I mean. Do they make non-frosted mini wheats?
They do.
They do. That's insane.
I know, right?
Well, now that COVID's hit, they're not going to make unfrosted mini wheats. It's all fucked. It's all gone. No, but I do think that there's an opening for Sanders here. But we also have no idea what the primary is going to look like in the future, how the voting's going to be done, how the convention's going to shake out. And I understand why Cuomo is getting the push that he's doing, because if you watch his press briefings from New York, the daily pressers that he's doing,
yeah.
So I've been watching those, and like I understand why they're getting a national audience, because he is acting like the president from Independence Day.
Nice.
I mean, the other thing I'm going to tell you about Andrew Cuomo is he's full of shit, and this is he's doing what he needs to do right now. He's acting like a president more than Trump is. He's giving that daily presser. When they get their masks and supplies, he goes to the Javits Center, poses in front of them in one of his like little windbreakers, those little disaster windbreakers that politicians wear. If you see Shin Godzilla when the prime minister gives his press briefing about
second time you plugged Shin Godzilla for me.
It's a great movie. I mean, and it's a great movie about government mismanagement of a disaster.
Now we're talking.
Well, there's a scene in that movie where, so Godzilla attacks. He's in Tokyo Bay. The prime minister, and in this movie, Godzilla has never attacked before. Nobody knows what a Godzilla is. It's not like part of the continuity. So
it's a reboot.
It's it's not a reboot because there's not going to be any sequels. It's an art film.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
But it's directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi. It's like, it's the best monster movie anybody's made since 1999. It's fucking excellent. But anyway, so actually, it's just straight up, it's the best sci-fi fantasy movie anybody's made this century.
It's a standalone movie, kind of artsy, kind of like Joker was a standalone comic book movie that was kind of artsy.
Except good.
Okay.
But so there's a scene in Shin Godzilla where the prime minister, like Godzilla's in Tokyo Bay. Nobody knows what the fuck's going on. He's already damaged the Tokyo Aqua Line, which is like a traffic pathway that goes underneath the bay. And so there's all this damage. He's got to go out and address the public. And he says, "Bring me my uniform." And then he puts on that fucking windbreaker that Andrew Cuomo wore when he was in front of all the medical supplies at the Javits Center. And then the prime minister gives a speech where he says, "We are absolutely certain that the monster will not come up on land." And then an aide walks up and says, "The monster has just come up on land." And this is kind of the government's response to COVID, in a nutshell.
Yes.
Shin Godzilla, great movie.
Done. This is the best argument you've ever made to get me to watch a Godzilla movie.
They're all great. I mean, not all of them, but most of them, some of them, probably about 10 are good. Anyway, but
this is out of what, 40?
No, 27.
27. Okay.
Actually, 28 now. Maybe 30 if you count the anime ones.
1 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's we could go off. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
Godzilla.
But yeah. So Cuomo's looking like a president.
Cuomo is looking like a president, and those pressers are impressive. Like, he talks about how hard it's going to be. He gives you the sense that he's not bullshitting you, and he does talk about real numbers. He talks about the difficulty of acquiring supplies. He spars with the president, which, as we both know, is a very important way to inject yourself into the national conversation. If you start sparring with the president and the president starts responding to you, suddenly you've got national prominence. 100%, I see Andrew Cuomo jujitsuing this disaster into an attempt to get drafted at the convention, however the convention is held. Cuomo's also full of shit. He's got prisoners in New York rebottling hand sanitizer in New York state branded hand sanitizer bottles to try and fake that Donald Trump on these relief checks is going to sign every check so that people know where their $1,200 one-time
Oh,
payment.
oh God, really?
Which is an
Oh,
advance
wow.
on next year's taxes. The fucking bullshit relief bill that is coming through. So that people know where their money is coming from, right? Like he's going to take credit for that to get political advantage. Andrew
Like that,
Cuomo.
it's
Andrew
like that
Cuomo is doing,
Futurama episode where Nixon gave everyone money with his name on it.
huh?
There's a Futurama episode where Nixon, where it's the head of Richard Nixon, who's president in the year 3000, gives everyone a tax rebate, and I think they're called Nixon bucks or something.
Yeah, Nixon bucks. Nixon actually did implement a test program of a UBI.
We've covered that. Sorry. I hate to keep changing from topic to topic, but looking back on it, I still stand by my vote. I made the best decision that I could, but dang it, now looking back on it, I maybe could have cast a sympathy vote for Andrew Yang.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did you really do the best you could? That's a good question.
I did what I thought was right.
There you go. And as did I. I'm still a little butthurt about Texas. All Sanders supporters are. But
money, yes, taxes, Trump.
But Cuomo's full of shit. Cuomo is jujitsuing this disaster to his political benefit. And I think that whether it's him or it's somebody else or it's Hillary, who's always in the wings, I do think that there's a big possibility, and there has been a big possibility through this whole thing, that no matter who is at the top of the ticket or in contention with Sanders, by the time you get to the convention, that somebody would get drafted from the convention floor on a second ballot. At which point, we started off talking about canceling elections and how un-American it is to cancel an election. How un-American would it be to install somebody who hasn't received a single primary vote or who wasn't even on the ballot for the majority of voting primaries?
Yep, that is a solid point.
I mean, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. My number one hope here going forward is because of the historic, problems with Joe Biden, whoever the Democrats end up nominating. If they nominate somebody who hasn't been vetted by the primary process, I am unsure at the ability of the corporate media to make that person not look like an undemocratic stooge. They might be able to do it. The people who fucking like the boomers who get their information from television are real fucking stupid. So they'll believe whatever you put in front of them. And it's like watching television advertisements that are coming out in the age of COVID is just like unreal. Like, you could get like a Jeep Wrangler delivered to your door now.
Oh.
Yeah, this is the perfect time to buy a fucking car. There's nowhere to go. Everything's shut down.
Can't drive anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but
no,
like,
I had to get my car jumped because I hadn't turned it on in a week, and the darn thing wouldn't turn on.
Yeah, the battery died. Fuck. No, I mean, like, we're off the map here. Predictions don't mean shit. Who knows?
Nope.
But I do think that there's a possibility here because of the weakness of the Democratic Party, the obvious weaknesses of Trump in the aftermath of COVID, and the relevance of Bernie Sanders' platform. If he wanted to run independent, I think he could make I think this is a unique set of circumstances. I think it could work.
Nope.
Why not?
Nope.
Why not?
Because he is still affiliated or ran in a Democratic primary, and it's just sheer numbers. If you split the Democratic vote, then by plurality you get a Republican victory. If Teddy Roosevelt could not win as a third-party candidate, it is my contention that no one in this country will ever succeed as a third-party candidate, because Teddy did just that. He got more votes and more electoral votes than Taft, but Woodrow Wilson got everything else. And that is a scenario that would repeat itself if what you're saying you want to happen happens.
I don't know. Because, like, how much do people give a shit about the parties at this point? Like, did Donald Trump win because he 100% convinced only Republican voters? No.
Well, let's go to 2016. Donald Trump won, yes, and it was a shocker. It was also one that was decided, as a result of very, very close races in Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, Pennsylvania. Now, if a high-profile Republican, not some no-name like Evan McMullen, if a high-level Republican, like, say, a Romney, had won third party and gotten, let's say, 5 or 10% of the vote instead of McMullen's like half of 1%, then we got President Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically you're saying that the party organizing infrastructure is still too strong for anybody to make an independent run at the president viable.
I would like to see it happen someday, but in this climate, with Bernie Sanders, who has a liberal base, yes, but it's still a base born out of the Democratic Party. And again, just sheer math, I don't see Bernie getting, like a third of the Republican vote that he would need to make up for
Okay, but how much of the
building a party out of nowhere.
but how much of the Republican vote is, especially like the rank
Well,
and file
also-
Republican
also-
vote, how much of it is working people? Because we're talking about 3.3 million unemployed.
Yeah.
We're talking about people whose family members are dying,
Yeah.
who are going
No.
into medical debt. We're
Yeah,
talking
well-
about people like looking at their society breaking down and the people in charge not giving a shit.
Yeah. And then you'd have Bernie Sanders, who they would argue could not win the Democratic primary and therefore is going to opt third party. I just don't see your average American, even with all the problems that you're saying, thinking, yeah, the guy to solve all my problems is Bernie Sanders. I don't know. It just, it doesn't click with me.
But these guys, like, what has Trump offered them? What has Biden offered them? Like, these are people, like, I'm talking, like, it's very easy for people to be lost in the ritual, the fucking, the political headspace, right? Where it's like, it just makes me feel better to vote for X. It makes me feel better to vote for Y, right?
Oh, sure.
When times are good. When they're relatively good. When the economy's strong, you got gas in your tank, you got and I'm not just talking about like, well, an incumbent is going to do well when the economy's doing well, et cetera, et cetera. I'm saying what we had is gone. And it's not coming back. I'm not saying that it's likely that we're going to get an independent victory. I'm just saying that it's like if there is any chance to rally behind somebody who's an FDR style, New Deal Democrat, which I think is like actually a pretty accurate description of Sanders in a lot of ways, it's this year. Because people who were thinking about, oh, I don't like Bernie, he seems so angry because MSNBC told me to 3 months ago, now their grandma is dead. Now their mom is in the hospital. Now they're like there are bodies being carted by forklift into refrigerated FEMA trucks in New York. 3.3 million people are out of work and those jobs are not fucking coming back. Whole industries are not coming back. We've been living for years and years and, in this incredibly fragile system where nobody has 2 weeks of income squirreled away. We've been living paycheck to paycheck, paying rent to landlords living paycheck to paycheck, working for businesses that are week to week or month to month. And if we shut down this whole economy in order to prevent this threat of this disease for another month, 2 months, everything falls in on itself. The comic book industry is gone. Like, I'm not saying this is like a huge industry, but like, this has been in America for 80 years, 40 years in the direct market. You review comic books. I'm a huge comic book fan. We fucking love this. It's an American institution. It's an American institution I respect more than voting. But they did not have the Diamond Comic Distributors, the monopoly that has been, distributing all of the comic books in the United States, as well as related merchandise. They didn't have 2 weeks of cash reserves. They are closed down indefinitely. And they're not paying their debtors. Like, they're not paying the people that they owe. They don't have enough money to survive what's happened already. That industry, gone. And that's going to happen again and again and again. This is a fucking huge deal. So I'm not saying it's necessarily likely. I'm just saying, and all the points that you made are very well considered. I'm just saying the normal laws of political gravity, I do not think apply to 2020. I think we are off the fucking map. Like, I think there's a lot of things that are possible now that would have been impossible in January. And of those things that are now possible, an independent winning the presidency is perhaps that's the least weird. You know what I mean? Like, I'm very scared about what's going to happen in the future, and you know, like, if we have a politics at all, I think this is one way that it could shake out. But that's just me. And once again, you know, it's not actually a counter to any of the very reasonable arguments that you have made. If there is any, if historical precedent has any fucking weight, you're probably right. So yeah. Anyway, that's all we have for this week. If there is still an election in the future, we'll do another one of these. You got any closing thoughts for the people, James?
No. Everyone protect yourselves by any means necessary, and stay healthy.
Yeah, stay healthy. Actually, you know, all jokes aside, everybody stay in, cover your mouth, you know, wash your hands, do all the good stuff. Let's not spread this disease any more than it needs.
Yeah. No, and I mentioned earlier, the masks are to protect people from whatever we may have, but mine also serves the purpose is that I had a moment of weakness and I almost shaved my beard because sometimes like I just got to scratch my face. But this helps me not scratch my face. So do whatever you can.
Well, that's another thing. The CDC actually revised its guidelines. They were saying that masks were not important for months and months. Now that the infection rate is much higher, yeah, they were. They revised their guidelines. They are now saying that masks are important for everyday citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've seen numbers, and like I don't know if it's actually true, but like they can block up to 89% of airborne particles, even incoming airborne.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
But the thing is that, you know, once again, the CDC lied for months about this. I think in order to promote a culture of false normalcy and keep the economy puffed up. I mean, we could talk about the government mishandling of this crisis for another 2 hours. But anyway, everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay vigilant.